All right, welcome back, Powers on Sports podcast. We are week 2 of the National Football League season, week 3 of the college football season. We've got 2 great guests for you this week. We're going to talk to George Ofman, a 40-year-plus media member in the city of Chicago, as the Bears come to Tampa Raymond James Stadium on Sunday afternoon for week 2, as the Bears visit the 1-0 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And from the other side of that matchup, we have TJ Rives, Buccaneers Radio, who's going to be it's a regular here on the podcast. And we're going to talk to both George and TJ about just some National Football League topics, as well as the Bears and Buccaneers matchups. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey, how are you?
We're all good, brother. The Bucs 1-0, like you said. And what a surprise. The Bears are already smarting. George, I just have to ask before Jason starts firing away, are they still up on the high buildings midweek? Because I thought this was supposed to be a new Chicago Bears. Aaron Rodgers is not in Green Bay, blah, blah, blah. And it looked an awful lot like what we've seen before. So are the Bears fans ready to write the season off after week 1, or what's the deal?
I think many of them are about to jump out basement windows. It's really not a good situation. I mean, sports radio has been inundated with people that want to fire everybody. And to be perfectly honest with you, I watched the game and I was stunned. They actually looked worse than last year. And you're thinking to yourself, they made a lot of offseason moves to improve their offense and their defense, and they looked so totally unprepared. And Justin Fields looked like he did last year, which was not good when it comes to a passer. So it was stunning, to say the least. I mean, yes, people are really angry here.
Yeah, watching that game Sunday, it was a disaster offensively. I mean, it was pitiful, and a lot of questions have to be answered with just. And if they throw another dud in here Sunday in Tampa, there will be some, like you said, there'll be some people flying off the skyscrapers there in Chicago.
They have to play the Chiefs in Kansas City the next week. How about an 0-3 start?
All right, number one question everybody wants to know before we started here: George had a new mattress delivered to the house. The mattress police wants to know: did you cut off the mattress tag?
Okay, I know that reference. Okay, I sat back because I was waiting for the end to see if you would stick that in, and you went second question. What we should say to the audience is sometimes the better segments of the show are off the air, and George is ready to, like, speaking of fire everyone, he's ready to head down to the mattress company with a torch and a pitchfork over what was being done, and Powers goes right in with the mattress question as the second question, as an inside joke. I'm glad you're going to be sleeping comfortably in the Ofman estate. That's all I'm glad for on that.
Yes, so am I. There's still a lot of work to be done, but yes, the mattress is here. Thank you for asking.
And it fits in perfectly with the Bears scenario right now, because the way they're playing, a lot of Bears fans are saying, I got to go lie down. I can't watch this anymore.
No, they don't want to do that because they already saw the Bears lie down.
Yeah, that's true.
And also, I want to ask a draft question. In all seriousness, was there any chatter of seriousness of keeping the number 1 pick in the draft last year and drafting Bryce Young and trading Justin Fields, or was that never even on the table?
Well, back then it was. Of course it was. That there was a lot of scenarios involved there. Is this management team going to stick with Fields? The answer was yes. What they did was a terrific trade, honestly. I mean, they got a really good wide receiver who, by the way, was targeted twice. He's their best player, targeted twice back-to-back. That's a huge issue among many issues in that game. So now, of course, the Bears do have some draft picks for next year, and the thought process is already, if this doesn't work, they may be drafting another quarterback, which they've been doing over and over and over in my lifetime, which has spanned, I'm not going to tell you how many years.
All right, let's stay in that division, or let's stay somebody who used to be in that division. Let's talk about the Aaron Rodgers injury Monday night. What a disastrous turn of events for the Jets and such. 4 plays in, he's done for the year. Just obviously, George, you know Rodgers well, being in that division, and TJ, you've covered him for years and years. what a blow to the Jets, and just talk about the deflation that the Jets franchise must be feeling. Go, TJ.
Well, I mean, I've talked to New York people for the last couple of days, and they're going through like the 12 steps of, anger, denial, all the different forms of grief here with this. To only have him for 4 plays, it's remarkable that it's over that fast. It's stunning that it's over that fast. I think that there was some belief that he might struggle, but I don't think anybody believed it's going to be over before it ever begins. And Jet fans at this point are convinced they're cursed. No matter what they do, they can't figure it out. They have a promising running back, Breece Hall, last year. Of course, he tears his ACL. They actually may have something straightened out on defense, and then a player gets suspended for whatever reason for PEDs or something. Or they draft Zach Wilson, who looked like he might be blossoming into a quarterback, and he goes completely south, not unlike what Justin Fields has done. And now they got to turn back to that guy. They got to turn back to Zach Wilson unless they make a trade for somebody else. So it's a mess. George, I just wonder, was there a lot of talk in and around Chicago too? Because Green Bay won the game. Jordan Love looked fantastic. And I don't want to say they were gloating Sunday, but they had to be thrilled with how Love played and how the Packers played against the Bears without Aaron Rodgers, right?
Well, yeah, Love was much more effective than Fields, which is not saying a great deal, but he was good. And I predicted the Packers would win the game. This is a team that has great history with quarterbacks, and of course, they've just destroyed the Bears over 30 years. This guy sat the way Aaron Rodgers did for 3 years before he really got a chance to be a starter. So I was impressed by the way he played. I was impressed by the way he was coached, which was the opposite of what the Bears did. Everything that could go wrong did. The game plan was bad. The coaching was bad. The players were bad. They've got to be better. And I think the odds here is when teams lose by double digits, they usually wind up winning the next game. That's happened a lot over the recent years. But, I mean, as far as Aaron Rodgers here, stunned by some of the reaction. There are people who said good for him. They're thrilled of what happened. And that's really terrible. It's awful. As much as Aaron Rodgers was a thorn in the Bears' side and last year said, I own you, which he really did, the fact of the matter is, look, he was resurrecting a career in New York, very celebrated, great for the game, and poof, gone in a second. So for me, that was awful. It was too bad. Great win for the Jets, by the way, whose defense is still really, really good, but it was a terrible situation.
And we keep bringing this back to, and Jason, I'm trying not to monopolize this, but we can bring it back to Tampa Bay in 2020 in the crazy year. Yep. Because Tom Brady at 43 years old with a much better offensive line, never got hit. He wasn't not only not getting sacked, he wasn't getting touched in a lot of these games. It was remarkable that they kept him so well protected like a fortress. Jason, you know this, in front of him. And at 43 years of age, he had a phenomenal season, and he may have even had a better season at 44 the next year. 5,000 yards and like 47 touchdowns in a 17-game season the following year at age 44, and it's largely because of the protection and the blocking, and the Jets didn't do as good a job maybe of fortifying that line. I mean, we don't know. I mean, it was 4 plays into the season. We don't know if this would have been a recurring thing where they were all over him every game and eventually he's going to get hurt. But man, it just makes you appreciate, Jason, what Brady did in 2020 even more at 43 years old.
And here's an unseen factor that not many people have talked about on the play that Rodgers got hurt. We've always ridiculed Brady about throwing the ball away. Rodgers could have thrown that ball away and not taken that hit and just thrown it in the ground and moved to the next down, and he didn't, and thus he got wrapped up and tangled up and got hurt, where Brady would have 1,000% thrown that ball right in the dirt, gone to the next down, and not got hit.
Yeah, but there's a bottom line to this too. Number one, that's not Aaron Rodgers' game. Aaron Rodgers can run. He has been elusive his entire career. Number two, the blaming of the turf. Forget about that. It was a freak injury.
Right.
It happened.
But, I can relate this. George, you'll remember this. They were playing at Lambeau on an opening night, like a Sunday night, back probably 7 or 8 years ago, and he didn't get rid of the ball, and one of the Bears landed on him and broke his collarbone, remember?
Yep.
And so it's kind of a similar thing on you can be a hero and you can be mobile and running around, and then you can also cost yourself if one of those 300-pounders or 275-pounders lands on you. like what was done. And I know we're dissecting this like we're NFL players or NFL quarterbacks, but I mean, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the Jets season is in peril, if not over, because of this. So much was based around him, and they got him for 4 plays. So it should be scrutinized the way that we're scrutinizing it.
And let's go there. Where do the Jets go from here? A lot of speculation the last few days. Do you trade for a guy like Jameis? There's some speculation of a guy like Jameis Winston. How much of a leash do you give Zach Wilson? Do you give him 3 or 4 games to see what he can do and then make a move? I'm going to throw out a couple names that I think if their teams get off to slow starts, they're in the last year of their contract, they could be a viable option 4 or 5 weeks from now. Kirk Cousins, Minnesota, Ryan Tannehill, Tennessee. Give me your thoughts.
George,
am I crazy?
Got a thought on either one of those names?
You're not, but I think that the Jets, I don't know who their backup quarterback is now, but they're going to need one now. They're going to need a veteran now, not to replace the current quarterback,
right?
But as a backup just in case. Now, down the road, that just depends. Depends on how the Vikings wind up doing. And I have a feeling that while they will not be 13-3 this year, they're not going to be 3-13 either.
Right.
So I think the first thing that the Jets are going to have to do is bring in a veteran backup quarterback and then see how Jones does as things go along. That scenario you're talking about, that's weeks away.
Right. No, you're
well, and if I'm not mistaken, Jason, I'm trying to remember from the preseason game. I have trouble remembering what I had for breakfast this morning. But from the preseason game, is it not?
Too?
Is it not the? I want to say, was it the Minnesota quarterback, the Minnesota college quarterback, like Tanner Morgan? Do I have that right? I think was the 3rd quarterback in the preseason, but they don't have him on the active roster. And to George's point, you got to have a veteran that's at least played some in the NFL. Because what happens if something happens to Zach Wilson?
Right.
I mean, you can't just turn it over to a totally unproven guy at this point. So the Cousins one is interesting because I just saw them, obviously, with the Bucs winning in the U.S. Bank Stadium, loud environment. I think I just got my hearing back on Tuesday morning as we do this podcast midweek from how God bless loud it was with the PA and the music. Cousins had some turnovers. Obviously, they won 13 games last year, but you bring up the point that he's in the final year of his deal. They have no obligation beyond this year to him. And your premise was if the Vikings struggle, the Vikings, as we release this podcast, play the Eagles on Thursday Night Football.
Right.
All right, if they're 0-2, if they're 1-3, if they're 1-4, are they showing an appetite? We might deal Cousins to New York and let him try it out with the Jets and see what we can get in return. I don't know, but it makes for juicy podcast conversation.
That's right.
On that.
All right, week 1 of the NFL season. Give me a couple of teams that impressed you, George, and a couple of duds. Obviously, where you're at, Chicago is probably in the dud category. But give me a couple teams that you really thought, man, they played much higher than I thought they would, or boy, they really underachieved in week 1.
Well, the Cleveland Browns would be one for sure. I'm not totally sold on Baker Mayfield. I think the Bengals are still going to be very good and possibly a Super Bowl team. But that was the one team that really surprised me. But then there are a lot of surprises in the first week. It's just how these teams develop. When you're talking about the Vikings, I just don't see them being a 1-4 team.
Right.
I don't think you drop from 13-3 and suddenly fall off the face of the earth. Yes, they could lose the Thursday night game to the Eagles, who certainly the Eagles are looking to bounce back. But to be honest with you, the Dallas Cowboys winning more than New York Giants, the Dallas Cowboys, that to me is a fluke as well. The Giants aren't like that. They're not that bad. And the Cowboys aren't that good.
How about Vikings play the Eagles this week, then Chargers at home, at Carolina, that's easier. So that's the first 4 games. Then Chiefs at home, and then at someone's Chicago Bears, Mr. Ofman. What is their record 5 games from now? Off to the 0-1 start, playing at Eagles, Chargers at home, at Panthers, Chiefs at home, at Bears. They could be 2-5 with the only win being Carolina. Yeah. I'm not being just hyperbole guy on the podcast, but they could be 3-4, 2-5. And then maybe
Troy gets out to a fast start and they're 4 games back in the division, or 3 or 4 games back in the division, then maybe that's something.
How do you not take the Dallas Cowboys as one of the surprise performances? Not just that they won, but 40-0. Did
Right.
you see the stat that, and I don't have it all, but in the New York Giants history of the New York Giants, they have not had a single season with a blocked field goal, return for a touchdown and an interception return for a touchdown and having 5 turnovers in a game, which they did. And I think it's like 2 more, and being shut out. And it's like 2 more things. It's like 6 things in the same season. They have not had that. And all of it happened Sunday night against the Dallas Cowboys. That's how catastrophic week 1 was. But it's only 1 game.
Yep.
And I think they will be fine. I don't think they're a 3-14, 4-13 team. I think they will be fine. I don't know if they're a 10-win team, but that's got to be the shocker. And then the surprising one is Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs losing and the lack of weapons, especially without Travis Kelce. Jason Powers, to you, how mortal did Mahomes look, and is that a concern moving forward on this?
Obviously, no Kelce affects their game plan of how they attack people and all that stuff. I don't think the Chiefs will have that many drop issues. I mean, I think that was kind of a fluke of all the drops they had. I'm not as concerned about that, but yeah, I mean, Chris Jones is back in the mix, though. That's a good sign. They re-signed him, so he'll be back playing. The defense actually played much better than I thought they would against Detroit on that Thursday night. But, you know, Mahomes is Mahomes, and over the course of 17 games, they're going to win minimum 10 games. I mean, whether they will 14-3 is one thing, but they're going to be right there in that division. And with the Chargers the way they are, and Denver and the Raiders, that's still their division to win.
Let me tell you something, Phil. My prediction at the beginning of this season, before it began, was a Super Bowl that would involve the Cincinnati Bengals and the Detroit Lions, which is a real sleeper pick on my part. But that team is not only on the rise, they're flying. That is a team that got tremendous amount of talent with a whole bunch of really good draft picks and a quarterback who seems to be revitalized and a coaching staff that's on fire. That's a good team.
And we will see the Lions come here. George, you'll appreciate this, when the Bucs put on the creamsicle orange coming up in October, the throwback game. The first time in a decade they'll do the throwback in the orange will be against the Lions coming in October. And yeah, it's fascinating. Lions have the Seahawks this week, Jason, as you know, for the matchup at home. And they do look like a hungry, together team that got the stops when they had to. So that was very impressive from them.
Do you know what I would rather see, TJ? I would rather see the Buccaneers wear those creamsicle outfits and the Bears wear their orange jerseys this Sunday. And then everybody can pretend it's Halloween and hide.
That's a good line. Well, the fascinating thing, I will tell you this story. I moved here. Jason's obviously a native. I moved here in the mid 80s when those Bears were rolling and eventually world champs with the 86 Bears. But they would roll in with Walter Payton and with that defense and Mike Singletary in the middle. And then Ditka coaching, right, with the fridge and with Dan Hampton. And these are guys that George has interviewed on his podcast, by the way. Dan Hampton, Gary Fensick, a lot of those guys on that 86 Bears team. And then eventually McMahon's the quarterback, Willie Gault's the receiver. They would come and destroy the Buccaneers, the bad orange-clad Buccaneers of John McKay and Lehman Bennett and Ray Perkins. George, with impunity, they would come in here and kick the crap out of the Buccaneers, and there'd be 30 or 40,000 Bears fans at Tampa Stadium every time that they would do it. So that's my initial experience that decade of the Bears being here and roughing up the Buccaneers. What's interesting is that ever since the Tony Dungy, John Gruden days and things flipping around, the Bucs have been much better in the series against Chicago, including winning a couple of years ago at home. So it's kind of flipped around, but I remember those Bears days, those Bears games in the 80s in Tampa.
Remember, the 85 season began with a victory over the Buccaneers at Soldier Field, in which I think Tampa led 14-0. It was a shootout game. I think the Bears won 38-24. And after that, I don't believe they allowed 10 points in a single game.
Wow.
More than 10 points in a game.
They played those were the Lehman Bennett Buccaneers, his first season, 85. Those Buccaneers were awful at 2-14, but they played competitively in both games, including in the game in Tampa. And I got the chance, Jason, to speak to Richard Dent a few years ago, and George knows him, and George has interviewed him a bunch. He's in the Hall of Fame. he was there for a Bucks Bears game, and I came over and I introduced myself and I complimented him and I said, congratulations on being in the Hall of Fame. And I said that 85 season was so magical. I said, what I remember is the Bucks were very competitive with you in both games. He goes, that we didn't take them seriously, and they were a lot better than their 2-14 record. He goes, they were in both games against us. No as doubt. Awful as that Buccaneer season was, to George's point, when the Bears were rolling along. But I'm telling you, Walter Payton would come around the end in like 1984 or 1985 at Old Tampa Stadium, and the crowd would erupt with Bears fans at Tampa Stadium, with Walter doing that shake leg hesitation move and take off and lower his shoulder and blast a Buccaneer defender out of bounds. You thought you were at Soldier Field when that was happening. It used to be that way.
The 80 Bears, and particularly the 85 team, which historically is probably the best defensive team in one season in the history of the league, they were also an extremely entertaining team. Yes. They had a lot of entertaining players, from Jim McMahon to the Fridge to Walter Payton to Otis Wilson to Singleton. Yep. They had a bunch of entertaining players. So you can understand why fans glommed and the Bears fans would travel. They were like the Beatles for a year.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You're listening to the Powers on Sports podcast. I'm along with TJ Rives, Buccaneer Radio Network, host of the Three Dog Thursday podcast. Does a lot of great stuff on a lot of different platforms. Does some great boxing stuff as we get into the fall boxing season. George Ofman, the longtime sports media member in the Chicago market. He's the host of the Tell Me a Story I Don't Know podcast. Talked to a lot of Chicago media personalities, former players and such. I want to ask you a question about a guy who's struggling up there, and you know him well, Steve McMichael. Talk about his struggle and, obviously all the sentiment around the hope that it's a better result than we think it's going to be with Steve and the struggles he's going through.
Well, I think right now the hope is that he is alive by the time the Hall of Fame voting is done, which a lot of people believe he will finally be inducted. Right. That's the really big question. I mean, he's got ALS and he is struggling. And not many people survive ALS for an extensive period of time. One of my closest friends lost his life because of ALS. But that sentiment is great. He really belonged in the Hall of Fame a long time ago. The problem was that a lot of the voters saw him being the guy who was helped by the Singletaries and the Dents. And yet, statistically, in sacks, I believe he's right among the top sack players in the history of the league, the most sacks. That alone should have gotten him into the Hall of Fame. So it's taken too long, but I expect that to happen on the Super Bowl weekend. People crossing their fingers that Mongo will be alive for it.
Right. And again, George has interviewed a lot of his teammates throughout his radio career and on his podcast, and they swear by what McMichael meant to that defense and that defensive line, for all of the attention that William Perry got and or deserved, or Mike Singletary got, or Richard Dent got, or the guys in the secondary got. McMichael's, I mean, George, you were telling me his stats in terms of sacks and tackles and defensive play, they stack up with all of the guys in his era that are Hall of Fame caliber guys. We're not,
absolutely.
We're not putting somebody on the finalist ballot that's an undeserving member. And that's what the point is. So, and I thought it was neat that Walter Payton's son was in the room with Steve McMichael. It's a very, it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch Steve McMichael in the state that he's in, ALS, but Jarrett Payton was in the room with him when the announcement, when the notification came, you've made the finalist list to go in the Hall of Fame. And they were having a bit of a celebration because, Jason, this is awful. He may not live until January when they do the official vote, but at least Jarrett Payton was able to be there with him, and Chicago's got their figurative arms around him in just what is an awful circumstance. There's no doubt.
Last question for you guys. I'll get you out. I'm going to change topics. We're going to go to a feel-good story in the city of Chicago here throughout the summer and hopefully into the fall. How about the Chicago Cubs? What a tremendous. I mean, in all seriousness,
there's a feel-good story here.
Well, I mean, nobody thought they would be where they're at now at this point of the baseball season. They've really come out of nowhere, played really well as a team. David Ross, the manager. What is the sentiment and the excitement level in on the north side there with the Cubs?
It's funny because I just interviewed Jim DeShays for the podcast yesterday, which will air next Tuesday. They may be a year ahead, but this is a very talented and likable team. Right now, they've got some struggles because they've got some people on the disabled list or the injury list, not the least of which is their closer, Alzolay, who's really been very, very good in that role. And Candelario is also on the DL as well. But they have so many mix and match players, and obviously, Bellinger has been one of the catalysts of all of this. He's having a spectacular. Remember, this guy missed 5 weeks of the season, still can wind up with over 100 runs batted in. Dansby Swanson was a great signing. Nico Horner has been great. Their defense is just outstanding. Seiya Suzuki, after he was benched for several games, has come back and has had a spectacular last 35, 40 games. And right now they're ahead in the wild card, which is likely what they're going to be getting if they can hold on, because they were within a game and a half of the Brewers, and then they lost 3 straight to Arizona. They end the season, by the way, on the road, 3 games in Atlanta and 3 games in Milwaukee. That is really tough, but it's been a very entertaining team. The question now is whether or not they can get their top starter from the beginning of the season to come back and to be prepared for the playoffs. Who would have thought that their best pitchers right now, Justin Steele for sure,
right?
Kyle Hendricks, Jordan Wicks, Assad. Who are these guys?
Right.
Well, they're part of the pitching staff now. Sloman, like I said, had a great first half and then suddenly fell off the cliff and then had a terrible injury. So, they've got a lot of question marks as the season winds down. And we've got just a couple of weeks left, but they've been very entertaining.
I spied George Ofman at a day game at Wrigley on my social media. You were catching a day game at Wrigley. There's nothing like, I haven't gotten to do that. You got to invite me sometime to a day game at Wrigley. I haven't gotten to do that yet. And I was just thinking when you were saying that, are Cubs fans allowed right now and allowing themselves to think about October? Have we gotten close enough where they can allow themselves? Because usually they're a Chicken Little bunch. The sky is falling, and they will not even entertain
2 weeks to go. We got 2 weeks to go.
I know, but it may be like until 2 days to go before we start accepting. Okay, now we can talk about October. Now we can talk about postseason.
They've been doing it. They've been doing it for a month, and I think they see it recently. They've got talent. This is a pretty interesting team, but it's also a feast and famine team, which has really been amazing. They are one of the leading scoring teams in the league, and they can go through stretches where they score 10 runs a game on average and then just completely shut it off and score a run or 2 or 3 or 2. That's the way they've been. So they need their offense to really click consistently now, but that's just been the whole season. It's been an inconsistent offense that is a good offense. It's not a home run driven offense, but it's been good enough. No, a lot of Cubs fans are looking at this team and saying they should be in the playoffs. How far they go, that's another matter. They don't think it's a World Series team. You never know in the game of baseball, though.
The cool thing is, if we can get to the final weekend of the season and all the marbles are on the line with Cubs and Brewers, with how close and what is it, 100 miles, something like that?
90 miles, but the bottom line, I just think that the Brewers, I don't think that the Cubs are going to catch the Brewers from the division. I really don't see. The Brewers have been playing terrific lately. I mean, the Cubs took 2 out of 3 for them ever since. I think the last 20 games, the Brewers ERA is like 2.3. Their pitching is spectacular. It really is. We
got to catch you up on. Wait a minute. We got to catch you up on the real drama, which is Tampa Bay Rays, Baltimore Orioles, and the race in the American League East, because everybody had that. The 28th and the 29th payroll, who have the 2 best records in the American League, and they play in Baltimore this coming weekend. Humongous, Jason, 4-game series where the division is probably on the line this weekend because Baltimore maintains like a 2 or 3 game lead, and if they can win like 3 or 4 against the Rays, they can all but put the division away. So
who would have thought that? Who would have thought that in the first month of the season? Looked like Tampa was going to run away with it. But the Orioles are another team that did the rebuild process. It's paying off dividends.
No doubt. They drafted well, and they've been economical in who they've signed and all that stuff. Well, gentlemen, Great job. I really appreciate the time. TJ, give the audience real quick where they can find you, Eugene and Dave, on the broadcast Sunday from the sidelines at Raymond James.
Okay, Tampa Bay area, 98 Rock, Buccaneer affiliates, Buccaneers mobile app. You can also hear it on Sirius XM and tune in. Mean Gene Deckerhoff's 35th season got off to a win, calling the Buccaneers victory in Minnesota. Now, this is the home opener with the Bears, so we look forward to that at 1 o'clock Eastern time, noon Georgia's time in Chicago. We look forward to it. It's going to be hot, George. Bears going to be in those dark uniforms. We'll see who's in shape in the second half and in the fourth quarter for that one. So it's going to be a blast. Jason, thank you as always. I love hanging out. I appreciate it, brother.
And George Ofman, tell everybody where they can find all the great stories. Tell me a story I don't know podcast and all the great stuff you do.
Well, we do that through Last Word on Sports. The next episode will be one with Jim DeShays. We currently have one now with a long-time trailblazer in Chicago radio. Her name is Cheryl Ray Stout. This is a person who broke 2 major Michael Jordan stories. It's really a wonderful story. Also, the book, Tell Me a Story I Don't Know, Conversations with Chicago Sports Legends, will be out in November. So there's a lot to look forward to. I'm looking forward to reading my own book and making sure that everybody buys one, like you and TJ.
Yes, we want other people to read the book besides George. And by the way, let me just prop the podcast. This man has hustled unbelievably because you're going to hear the likes on previous podcasts. If you go search the names Michael Wilbon, Bob Costas has a Chicago tie,
Mike Greenberg,
Joe Madden on this podcast, Mike Greenberg on this podcast. He recently talked to Brett Bielema, the coach at Illinois. Illinois got a big one with Penn State this weekend. Brett Bielema may be already on the hot seat in Big Ten. George just talked to him recently. Tremendous storytelling podcast, fans. Go find Tell Me a Story I Don't Know. Search it under Last Word on Sports Media, and you will find that podcast with all those episodes. And I look forward to many more fun ones that are going to be coming this fall from George and the book. It's fantastic.
Well, gentlemen, have a great week and appreciate the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. See you.